Welcome to Defund the BBC. I'm Ted Jeffrey, and joining me this week is Conservative MP and former teacher, Brendan Clarke-Smith. Brendan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Ted.
So this week, the BBC has been slammed for allowing Nicola Sturgeon to routinely use her briefings to push her political agenda. The BBC know these briefings are practically party political broadcasts. So, Brendan, why have they decided to air every single one? Isn't this just the BBC pushing their own anti-union agenda?
Well, yeah, I think there's a responsibility to air briefings, as we've had with the coronavirus ones, with the PM and so on, and Chris Whitty, and we see all of that. But I think the Nicola Sturgeon ones, if you look at some of the line of questioning particularly, it doesn't quite follow the same standards, I would say. And I think there's almost a lack of scrutiny and a lack of questioning there. So I think what I would say is if you're going to have these briefings and you're going to have this broadcast, then I'd like to see the same standard of questions, the same line of questioning, and the same level of balance that we're actually seeing the other side of the border. But of course, we are the United Kingdom, and I want to see standards applied equally across everywhere. And we're not separate countries; we're one country in that sense. And I think that's the line we need to take.
And as we appear to be seeing, BBC bias is getting worse and worse. The corporation has just recently appointed two openly biased, anti-Brexit, Boris-bashing news chiefs. Now, not that this wouldn't be the first time they've done this, but surely this is a clear breach of the Royal Charter Agreement.
Well, yes, it's quite worrying. And I think you look at what people have put on social media in the past, and I'm certainly not opposed to people having their own political views. I think it's healthy to have a wide and sort of diverse spread there. But you have to be impartial, and you have to show that you're actually not going to take that into your job and so on. A lot of those things have been deleted now. There's been a lot of backtracking. We've seen a lot of reports of various things, and considering they weren't particularly a long time ago either, you have to ask, are you really going to get a fair crack of the whip there? For example, there are shows on the BBC a lot of us won't go on because we don't feel that. I would look at, say, Newsnight, for example. There's a perception there that we're not necessarily getting sort of the fairness that we're looking for, and because of that, people are reluctant to go on it. So when you have people at the very, very top who are going to be making these decisions, you want somebody who you think is going to be fair and balanced. And it's not just being fair and balanced, it's being seen to be fair and balanced. And at the moment, I think there's a bit of a problem there.
And obviously, you mentioned Newsnight. Emily Maitlis has recently given an interview in which she claims there was no wrongdoing in either of her impartiality breaches. Do you think it's a case that highly paid, condescending and left-wing talent can almost get away with anything at the BBC without fear of sort of any serious repercussions?
Yeah, I think it's almost the curse of Twitter, isn't it? I think people think they're in this online world and this sort of bubble in Twitter where they say what they like and there's no comeback to it and so on. And I think I think Gary Lineker is another one. He tweets quite a lot of his views, which is fine. But of course, when you're on the BBC, and it's not really your job to editorialise in that sense, especially when you're a newsreader. And I know Emily Maitlis has been sort of slapped on the wrist a couple of times with that. So you would have thought there'd been a sort of a learning curve or a few discussions that had gone on there. But if it's continuing, maybe not.
And a former BBC employee and now avid critic of the corporation, Robin Aitken, wrote about in The Telegraph how the BBC is completely unaccountable. Every other week there is another scandal and subsequent internal investigation that ends up leading to nothing. Would you agree that it's time to stop funding a corporation that looks down its nose at the licence fee payer and doesn't respect the people who are at times criminalised for not paying the licence fee?
Yeah, I think it's not a new thing either, is it? We can look back at things like Martin Bashir's interview. It's gone on for a number of years in many cases, and not just the BBC, but of course the unique way the BBC is funded. means that there are different standards to adhere to, and you do hold them to those standards the same as we are as parliamentarians, really. People say it's one rule for us and one rule for others. Yes, it is, but not in that way. I'd say we're held to higher standards, and this the same I would expect from the BBC and our media as well. So with things like that, yes, you would expect a tough line to be taken. I was very unhappy. I wrote to the Director General when Robert Jenrick was on television with the flags behind him, and the breakfast presenters I thought were incredibly disrespectful about that. And I think sometimes it needs pulling up an action to be taken. So yeah, I mean, we have high standards. People are paying for this. People don't have a choice about paying for this either, which I'm sure something we'll probably go into a bit more depth with. I think the funding model's outdated, and that's something certainly needs to be looked at.
And obviously, you're not the only one who thinks that. For example, Rupert Lowe, a former MEP and guest on this channel, said the other day that we should scrap the BBC licence fee, make it a subscription service, and let the people decide. Essentially highlighting that if the BBC is such a national treasure, then it would surely thrive under such a model. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've said a very similar thing in the Westminster Hall debate and in the Commons about the funding as well. And you look at Netflix; they've been very successful. There's a lot of things the BBC can do because it's not been commercialised. But then I look at some of the salaries people are on. I look at some of the programmes that are being produced, which you do see in commercial television as well. And you have to ask, what extra value are we getting for this? And that's where I think those standards we were talking about apply. If you don't feel that you're getting that, that's one argument. But the other is in this modern age, do we need to fund things the way we currently are? And I really am not convinced that we do. I think subscription models are a really good way forward. People can opt into it. And I mean, I'm not anti everything that the BBC does. I enjoy quite a lot of their content, have done for many years. The different series that they put on, I'll listen to Radio 2 and things. I'll listen to sort of Ken Bruce or Steve Wright or whoever, and some of the local radio is really good. A lot of the programming's great, and there's a lot of good things that the BBC does. But if I want to see them, I can subscribe to that, the same as I do with Netflix or something else, and I can opt in and I can pay for what I want to. And I don't think it's fair that you're having the entire population, people on low incomes. If you look at a lot of the prosecutions, it's overwhelmingly single low income mothers or the elderly, and they're having to pay for a lot of things that they don't use. Anything else in society, you don't use it, you don't pay for it generally.
No, exactly. I couldn't put it better myself. And to wrap things up, I'm sure you've heard that BBC chiefs have been forced to defend their diversity SAR, June Sarpong, being paid £267,000 a year, despite only working 3 days a week. Why is the licence payer being forced to pay for someone who doesn't even work full time at the BBC and ends up getting paid more than the Prime Minister to essentially just preach?
Yes, it's nice work if you can get it, isn't it? And again, June Sarpong was the front of the Remain campaign. Now, I don't have a problem with that. It doesn't mean that you can't do your job properly or anything like that. And again, it's that diversity between of different views. But I don't think that means somebody should be getting upwards of £250,000 for doing a part-time job, which, as you say, is considerably more than the Prime Minister earns. That's not even a full-time job. I think it's more than the Director General or whoever owns it as well, which is quite an outrageous sum of money. And I'd like to know what value we're getting for that. And likewise, what kind of diversity are we talking? In terms of diversity, I'd like to see more of a base in the north. There's a little bit of that we're going to Salford, but how many working class people do they have working for them? How many people who are university educated, non-university educated? Is there a real mix there? I'm a Red Wall MP, as to say, is there a section of society that's being missed there, or is it just the same old people who are working for the BBC who, because they know somebody or they've gone the traditional route? And I think when we talk about diversity, that's the kind of diversity we actually forget sometimes. Diversity of opinions as well. GB News, of course, set up, they saw a real gap in the market, so to speak, because that diversity isn't there. And I think when they talk about diversity, sometimes they're obsessed with putting people in boxes. And I think for £250,000, I'd like to know exactly what they're doing.
Well, Brendan, thank you very much for joining us today at Defund the BBC. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Cheers for having me on.